Staff Sergeant Reese Brennan's powerful arms cinched tight around Lieutenant Commander Sarah Garrett's neck, pinning her to the mat. Heat rushed to her face as her airway closed. She struggled, vision dimming, and slapped her open palm against his forearm. Tap, tap, tap. The universal signal to release. Brennan ignored it. A stunned silence fell over the training hall. Dozens of trainees and instructors froze, eyes wide, as they watched their instructor hold the choke far beyond any acceptable limit. Sarah's boots scraped weakly against the mat. Her lungs burned. The edges of her vision blurred. Still, Brennan didn't loosen his grip. Only seconds before she lost consciousness, he finally released her. Sarah collapsed forward, gasping as air rushed violently back into her lungs. She coughed hard, one hand clutching her bruised throat. Brennan stepped back, calm and detached, as if nothing unusual had occurred. "That's how fast it can happen," he said coolly, sweeping his gaze over the shaken onlookers. "In real combat, the enemy won't stop just because you tap out." His voice echoed in the tense hall. No one spoke. Sarah pushed herself upright, trembling but refusing to stay down. She rose to her feet and met Brennan's eyes with an icy, unflinching stare. A dark red mark was already blooming across her throat, where his arm had crushed her. Wind. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. That stare carried a promise. This wasn't over, just days earlier. Sarah had been seated alone at a cold metal table in a windowless briefing room deep beneath Naval Operations Command in Norfolk, Virginia. She had arrived 10 minutes early, back straight, hands clasped to hide a faint tremor. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, filling the silence. 6 months had passed since her mentor, Master Chief Wade Hollister, had died in what the official report labeled a training accident. 6 months since Sarah began to believe it hadn't been an accident at all. The heavy door opened, and Admiral James Carson entered. Sarah snapped to attention, but he gestured for her to sit. He offered a quiet nod of sympathy. He had known Hollister too. Carson's expression darkened as he spoke. At the Coronado combat training, annex where Hollister had died, there had been unspoken complaints about an instructor, pushing training beyond discipline and into cruelty. Nothing formal. No names on paper, just whispers. Sarah's stomach tightened. Coronado was the core of SEAL training, but the annex was a joint close combat program. Hollister had been there on temporary duty when he fell to his death from a fast rope tower after a rope anchor mysteriously failed. Hollister was investigating that annex when he died, Carson said. Sliding a photograph across the table, it showed Staff Sergeant Reese Brennan, sharp-featured, confident, and dangerous. "I don't believe in coincidences, Lieutenant Commander." Sarah's jaw hardened. Wade Hollister had survived decades of combat only to die stateside in a freak mishap. "It wasn't an accident," she said quietly. "It was murder disguised as one." Carson nodded. Officially, there was no proof, only suspicion. But a routine anchor failure during a standard drill was too unlikely to ignore. "It happened on Brennan's watch," Carson said. "And something is very wrong there." He leaned forward. "I want you to go in as our eyes and ears. 60 days. Oversight assignment. Observe. If anything's off, find it." Sarah didn't hesitate. "I'll go." She owed Hollister everything. Carson lowered his voice. "Be careful. Brennan isn't alone. Captain Marshall Teague protects him, believes in his methods. You're not fighting one man. You're fighting a culture." Sarah accepted the folder. Hollister had once dragged her out of a kill zone in Afghanistan. This was for him. "With all due respect, Admiral," she said steadily, "they picked the wrong sailor." The next day, Sarah arrived at the Coronado Combat Conditioning Annex. It was nothing like the polished brochures. It's just sun-baked prefab buildings, sand-coated obstacles, and a corrugated warehouse serving as a training hall. Inside, conversations died as she entered. The air smelled of sweat, rubber, and old canvas. Marines and sailors paused mid-drill to stare at the Navy Lieutenant Commander and at the woman standing in their brutal domain. 3 men approached. At the center was Reese Brennan, powerfully built, eyes sharp and calculating. The others flanked him like satellites drawn into his orbit, His handshake was firm, his smile hollow. "Welcome to the annex, ma'am. We hear you'll be observing." Observing. A deliberate word. Sarah returned his grip without flinching. "I'm here to ensure all training meets Navy and Marine Corps standards." Brennan laughed lightly. "Safety and discipline are our priorities." Nearby instructors exchanged knowing smirks. "I know the difference between tough and reckless," Sarah said calmly. Brennan's smile thinned. "We forge warriors here, within regulations," she replied softly. Their standoff drew the room's full attention. Finally, Brennan gestured to a young Marine. "Beckett, show the Lieutenant Commander the admin office." As Sarah followed Corporal Beckett away, she felt Brennan's eyes burning into her back. The contest had begun. Inside the cramped office, Beckett avoided eye contact, hands shaking as he logged in. "You can speak freely with me," Sarah said gently. "Off the record," she mentioned Hollister. Mentioned Beckett's withdrawn statement. The Marine crumpled. He confessed everything. Brennan inspecting the tower beforehand. The anchor bolt loosened. Hollister falling 50 feet to concrete. "I told Captain Teague," Beckett whispered. "He threatened my career." Sarah listened, fury burning beneath calm. "You weren't weak," she said firmly. "You were silenced." She promised protection, promised truth. After a long pause, Beckett nodded. "I'll testify." By nightfall, Sarah had evidence, witnesses, and confirmation. Brennan's brutality wasn't accidental, it was systemic. And Brennan knew she was watching. The next evening, during an unofficial night session, Brennan finally dropped the mask. The training was savage, unsafe, punitive. And then he turned to her. "Lieutenant Commander Garrett," he said with a predator's grin. "Care to demonstrate?" Sarah stepped onto the mat. "All right, Staff Sergeant," she said evenly. "Show me what you've got." The room held its breath. The real fight was about to begin. The circle widened as the onlookers stepped back. Under the harsh yellow light, Sarah and Brennan faced each other, two figures of equal height but starkly different builds. Brennan was solid and muscular. Sarah was lean, coiled, and ready. They circled, exchanging quick holds and counters. Sarah's speed and technique drew audible gasps. She was clearly more skilled than expected. Brennan's strength, however, was undeniable, and his grin widened with every resisted move. Suddenly, he swept her legs out, and in an instant, he was on her back as they hit the mat. His arms wrapped around her neck in a brutal rear choke. Sarah's mind sharpened with focus. The choke slammed under her chin. Reflexively, she tucked her head and slapped her hand against his forearm. A tap out. Nothing. Twice more. Harder. Still, Brennan's grip remained iron. Murmurs of concern rippled through the circle. Panic edged her mind as her vision tunneled. The same cruelty he had shown others was now applied to her. Finally, as her limbs began to go limp, he released. She rolled to her side, gasping. Nearby voices whispered or cursed, the tension palpable. Brennan rose, almost casually, scanning the stunned spectators. "Remember this," he said, voice calm. "The enemy doesn't stop just because you tap. Better to learn here than out there." He glanced at Sarah, kneeling and coughing, and added, "Training like this will keep you alive when it counts." Despite the ache and humiliation, Sarah forced herself to stand, refusing the help offered by a sergeant. Legs shaky but pride intact, she met the room with quiet resilience. Brennan nodded to the group. "That's it for tonight." The trainees dispersed in uneasy silence. Some staring at Sarah in shock or newfound respect, others hurried away wanting to forget. Beckett lingered, eyes anxious. She gave a slight shake of her head, no hints of weakness for Brennan. Once alone in the locker room, Sarah gripped the sink and studied her reflection. A dark red band already encircled her throat, and her hands trembled with adrenaline and fury. She photographed the bruise, timestamp visible. Evidence. A soft knock interrupted her. "It's Reeves," came a hissed voice. Dalton Reeves, retired Master Chief, slipped inside with a laptop under his arm. "You all right?" he asked. Sarah's throat raw, she replied, "I'll live." Reeves set the laptop down, opened it. Grainy thermal footage flickered to life. The screen showed the previous night from Hollister's hidden cameras. Brennan, on Sarah's back, her taps ignored, the rear choke tightened. 11 seconds passed from first tap to release. Sarah's stomach turned, witnessing the cold execution from this angle. Reeves reminded her, "We have a whole drive of incidents." Sarah's voice was steady. "We need to bring this into the light." K-plan formed as she whispered to Reeves. A formal evaluation of the Annex's training program. High-ranking officers and a JAG attorney would witness a realistic, resisted chokehold demonstration. She volunteered herself. Brennan's ego would lead him to repeat his behavior on record, under scrutiny. Reeves smiled faintly, approving. 2 hours later, Sarah drafted a formal memo requesting a combat readiness evaluation, focusing on chokeholds and tap-out procedures. By midday, it was approved. In 2 days, Base Commander, Captain Walsh, Captain Teague, and a JAG officer would oversee it. Brennan would be the lead demonstrator. Corporal Beckett caught up with her, nervously revealing he had recorded the previous night's session. Sarah instructed him to send it securely and erase the original. "Are we really going to win?" he asked. "We will," Sarah replied firmly. In 48 hours, hidden evidence would become public, and Brennan and Teague would face the consequences. On the day of the evaluation, the training hall had been transformed. Mats cleaned and arranged, rows of chairs for evaluators, high-definition cameras mounted. Sarah, in her khaki uniform, with her ribbons and dual-seal tridents, including Hollister's, stood poised. A hush fell over the room. Captain Walsh called the meeting to order. Brennan, confident, began with compliant demonstrations using Corporal Beckett as his assistant. Tap-outs were respected, technique pristine. The audience, including Teague, nodded along, but those present during previous abuses exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, Sarah requested a resisted scenario to simulate a real sparring situation. She volunteered herself. Gasps echoed. Teague protested, but Walsh allowed it. Brennan faced her, hunger in his eyes, unable to hold back. The fight was real. Sarah landed a quick counter, drawing gasps and applause, but Brennan's pride pushed him harder. A leg sweep brought her to her knees. He was behind her, arms locking in a rear choke. Her taps went ignored. 11 seconds. Gasps and alarmed voices filled the hall. When he finally released, Sarah collapsed, coughing violently. Beckett stepped forward, voice strong. From first tap to release, 11 seconds. "This isn't the first time. Brennan did the same to me months ago." He revealed the truth of Hollister's death and the systemic abuse. Teague protested, but the JAG officer intervened. Grainy footage of past abuses played, showing a clear pattern. Captain Walsh, furious and resolute, relieved Brennan of duty and suspended Teague, pending investigation. As MPs escorted Brennan out, Sarah confronted him. "Wade Hollister built warriors the right way. You chose ego and brutality instead." Brennan could only mumble a weak defense. Sarah's steel-eyed verdict left him silent, broken. Weeks later, Sarah rebuilt the Annex program. Drills were supervised, voluntary sessions abolished, tap-outs respected, anonymous reporting implemented. Discipline replaced brutality, teamwork, and respect replaced fear. Beckett became her right hand, confident and proud. On the inaugural session of the reformed program, Sunlight highlighted a plaque dedicated to Hollister. "Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment." Sarah spoke to the instructors about honor, character, and trust. Forging a new culture, Reeves presented her with Hollister's Navy Cross and a note. "Finish what we started. I'm with you in spirit." A tear fell as Sarah pressed it to her heart, knowing she had carried out his last wish through courage. Vigilance and integrity, Sarah ensured the program honored Hollister's legacy. Toughness was now measured by discipline and respect, not silent suffering. Her quiet bravery changed countless lives, proving true courage is standing up when others won't.